Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the Talking City podcast. My name is Dan Murphy. I'm very, very happy to be back once again, and joining me today, as ever, is Mr. Joe Bray. Joe, how's it going?
Yeah, not going too bad. Apart from the roadworks outside my house, which have been keeping me up all night and throughout the day. But we'll persevere. I'll mute when I'm not talking, so you don't hear it.
Well, it's going to be a difficult one because I also have gardeners outside my house today, cutting some grass and cutting some trees. So if you hear some funky noises in the background, we can only apologise. Mr. Simon Bajkowski, is there anything going on untoward outside your house?
The only thing is that the sun is kind of streaming directly into my face, but I was told off by our producer overlords for my room being too dark.
Yeah, in the back cave.
Yeah, so YouTube viewers will be delighted to see me squinting through the whole of this. The things we do for content, eh?
Exactly. But I'll tell you what, City fans were delighted to see at the weekend. It was them run out, massive winners once again. What a week it has been for the Blues. Only, about 13 goals in 14 goals. I can't even count. 13 it was in 2 matches. 6-0 win over Burnley side. I mean, it feels like the power's back, baby.
Yes. Yeah, it's been a hell of a week for City. If you sort of include the win at Palace as well, 3 different competitions, 3 big wins, and a lot of positivity to go into the international break with. It's a nice mug, by the way. Not quite the mug that
Thank you.
Jack Grealish has got, but
No,
a nice
no.
mug.
But what is?
Yeah, it was 2 sort of huge performances at home, basically, that kind of reinforce City's credentials in the Champions League and the FA Cup. And I mean, I was walking to the ground on Saturday when they played Burnley. I was just thinking, I was like, they can win the actual treble, City, this season. And nobody had mentioned a word of it really, and we won't talk too much about it because it is still very, very tough to achieve. But it's kind of a reminder that everyone's been talking about this season as like City underachieving and not being where they should be. But they're kind of set up again for what could be a very exciting end to the season.
Yeah, both Manchester clubs, of course, going for a treble. I wonder whose would be slightly better.
One Manchester club is going for the treble.
And the other's going for a treble.
And the other one's going for a quadruple. But not the.
Exactly. I'd be very surprised if they did make it 4 somehow at this point. But as you say, City going great guns. And Joe, Burnley, I don't think anyone... Guardiola, when Burnley were back in the Premier League, used to always say it's a trip to the dentist, and I think they never once lost to Burnley, and at the Etihad would always hammer them. So there was nothing new here in that respect in terms of the result, but it was a very different Burnley team, of course. We'll talk about kind of Vincent Kompany a bit more specifically later on, but this was a different Burnley at the same old story. I think kind of going into the match, there was maybe... I don't think anyone questioned if City could win this or would win this, but it was going to be an intriguing match to see a different Burnley come to the Etihad, one who's playing some exciting football in the Championship, at 12 points clear, I think. Maybe that's shrunk over the weekend since they weren't in action. But a healthy lead at the top of the Championship, almost certainly to come back to the Premier League at first time of asking, which I don't think anyone expected just shy of a year ago. Yet it was kind of the same old story, so it's kind of impressive from City that, high block or low block, it doesn't really matter. City are just going to absolutely pulverise Burnley pretty much.
Yeah, well, if you look at the first half, Burnley were on top and they were pressing and they were causing City loads of problems, and you see that when you've got a confident Championship side. I think I mentioned in the last podcast we did that I think it was Fulham last season they were top of the Championship and gave City a really good go. City obviously won and were comfortable winners in the end, but it's always refreshing, isn't it, when a team comes to the Etihad and gives it a go, and Burnley definitely did that, and backed by a big following, they were giving it a really good go, pushing City into a couple of maybe little mistakes. I think there was one where it was Ortega might have given the ball away a bit easily, and Rico Lewis just stared him down after getting just about clearing the ball and forcing the Burnley player wide. But it wasn't all going City's way, and obviously Erling Haaland then does what Erling Haaland can do and has been doing very frequently. But until those two quick-fire goals, you have to say Burnley were on top, and after that, then I mean, we saw Leipzig last week. It's hard when City have just scored two and are in the mood. It's hard to even get close to them, and you know that the game is pretty much gone from you there. And after that, it was a matter of just how many are City going to get. But no, Burnley were one of the better teams to come to the Etihad despite the scoreline, just because they gave it a go and were probably caused City more problems than most teams will do all season.
Yeah, well, let's kind of move on to that man once again, Erling Haaland's side. And the only question to ask is he making City worse?
No. Well, it's.
I think we could put that to bed now for defo.
I don't.
Like, the debate is done.
It's not. It's not. As much as we'd like it to be done, the second they lose or he doesn't score, it will be.
No.
It will rear its head again, and people will still say it. But yeah, it's obscene, and it's a bit like the sort of peep show meme. But 5 goals in a game is a hell of a lot of goals, and yeah, only done twice before. Once one of those was Messi, so Pep's been responsible for 2 out of the 3 in the Champions League. Players getting 5 goals, and then 3 against Burnley. Yeah, he is, as Jack Grealish said, a ball magnet. The ball just comes to him, and he knows where to be at exactly the right time. It's remarkable. I've never seen anything like it, and maybe people older than I have, because I'm such a young buck still. But no, it's you just lose kind of all perspective and have to reframe your world to Erling Haaland's, basically, because he's just setting his own standards.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know we're kind of like facetious over the question, and the way I think some maybe fans or pundits or bad faith actors have kind of tried to say Haaland's made City worse. I don't think we ever said that, but I think we have kind of argued in good faith on this podcast over the recent months that there was something wasn't quite clicking, Joe. There was, Haaland, you could see, was it the Dortmund, I want to say? Oh no, Leipzig at home, Leipzig away, wasn't it? When he just wasn't getting found. He was making the runs time and time again, and no one was kind of looking for him. You could see he kind of was getting on his nerves a bit. There was a couple of matches in that kind of dodgy City run where he was hardly touching the ball, and that kind of gave credence to the people who were saying Haaland's made them worse, which was never the case. But there was clearly something going a bit awry for a moment there, and I wonder what kind of has changed in recent games where the chances are now falling to Haaland. I mean, I think we said, the Forest game and that Leipzig game, he only got 1 chance in those matches and wasn't really able to take them. Whereas now he's getting 5 and 3 a match, and he's scoring hat tricks of fun. I'd love to know if anyone's ever scored like a hat trick of hat tricks in succession before, but he'll be on for that once the international break is over. So what has kind of changed in the last few weeks where he is just banging them in at will again now, just like he was at the start of the season?
I don't know about a hat trick of hat tricks, but he got 3 hat tricks in 3 home games earlier in the season, so he's close enough for that. And if
there was one person to have done it, it is him.
He has those spells though, doesn't he, where just everything he touches and everything he does is a goal, and it will fall kindly to him. But you've got to be in the right place, and I think if he doesn't score, I think I said this last week, he doesn't score many spectacular goals. He just scores the simple goals so often, and if it was so easy, everyone would have done it before. I think that's the remarkable thing about him, that he is always there and always on the spot and just so reliable with those sort of poachers goals. I think after those games you mentioned, I think a couple of things have happened. One, I think Haaland started coming deeper a bit more and has been a bit more effective. There's been a few times where he's come basically to the centre circle, laid it off, and then we know that when he turns and runs, he's unstoppable, and his runs are often very good. Maybe the quality of those runs and the space he's allowed himself gives players like Gundogan and De Bruyne a bit more opportunity to find. I don't know, but I think also the balls to him have been have been a lot better. I think Alvarez for his goal against Burnley, the 1-on-1. I think that was a really clever ball. I think Guardiola said it's a risky pass when you play that ball to Haaland, and it's often safer just to go to the wings. Maybe City are taking a few more risks with those balls because they know that Haaland is always going to make that run. So whether it's Haaland coming a bit deeper, I think his all-round play, especially in the last 2 or 3 weeks, has got a lot better. And I think that coincides with City going on this run. They're just a bit more confident, aren't they? And everything's working a bit freely. And when you're more confident, you can play those balls with sort of a bit more chance of getting to the striker. And no, I think everything's just coming together at the moment when it might not have been a few weeks ago.
I think that's really interesting, actually, because if we kind of throw our minds back to 2021, the striker City wanted to sign before Haaland, of course, was Harry Kane, and he's made himself so good in the last maybe 4 or 5 years at dropping deep, getting on the ball, kind of starting the moves himself, and then getting into the right position to finish them. Maybe that's what Guardiola was kind of looking for, Si. And in Haaland, he's got the man who can do the finishing. That was, he's not had to do any work there, but maybe it's just we've said many times, it always takes the wide forwards or midfielders a year or so. Look at Grealish, probably 18 months to kind of really get used to Guardiola's methods and what he wants. And it's not even taken Haaland that long. He was scoring straight out of the gate, but maybe it's just taking him a bit longer to really, and there's been a World Cup in there as well, let's not forget. Maybe it's just taken a bit more time for him to kind of get used to that coming deep rather than being on the shoulder where he always was at Dortmund. Dortmund were always looking for him straight away with their quick counter-attacking play, whereas City, they're a bit more patient. He wants Haaland to be a bit more involved. Obviously, there's the options there to go long and go direct when it's needed, but in general play, maybe it's just taking Haaland a bit of time to get used to that, coming short for it, getting involved, and then making your run when the play has, surpassed him.
Yeah, and I think what's important is, it took Sergio Aguero quite some time to adjust to Pep Guardiola's demands, and this was Aguero, City's greatest ever goal scorer, who had played in the Premier League for 5-6 years by the time Guardiola arrived, and was still kind of struggling to do what Guardiola wanted. So Guardiola's demands are very demanding. He was demanding twice there. That was silly of me. And also the Premier League takes time to adjust to. But I think, Haaland is such a quick learner, and the team have also been kind of adjusting to him. I think what's been interesting recently is Guardiola saying that he wants Haaland to have touches and be involved in the game even when he isn't scoring. There was a bit kind of earlier in the season when Haaland said he'd be happy to have 5 touches all game and score 5 goals when everyone was getting like weirdly obsessed with how many touches he had. And the players have said it kind of takes the weight off them that they know that there's a player who can go like 30 minutes without taking a touch, and still be clinical. Now Guardiola's view is that Haaland is more clinical when he takes more touches and when he's more involved. So I think that is kind of an adaptation that is still ongoing, sort of how much Haaland needs to be involved to be as clinical as he is and sort of in those positions when the ball just drops to him. And yeah, like we've all said, it is kind of a work in progress and there will be highs and lows. But when it's a player with Haaland's ceiling, there are far more highs than lows.
And when the working process has already got 40 goals, I mean, it's not bad, is it? It's not bad. But, the other striker who, of course, arrived in the summer and has been in Haaland's shadow a little bit is Julian Alvarez, Joe. But he, again, when given a start, impressed, scored twice and was involved in and the other 4 goals as well. And it's interesting how I know Alvarez is kind of tended to play against kind of inverted commas lesser opposition and so it might be a bit skewed, but it's when he plays with Haaland, them two both seem to really flourish together. Now, having them both, it's hard. It seems like Guardiola wouldn't be able to do that in games when he's really concerned about control because he's basically sacrificing a midfielder to have Alvarez in the middle and in and around Haaland. Well, obviously not in Haaland. Oh, I've just fallen for the cliche. I'm going to be on it one day. But them two work really well together, and I'd be quite intrigued to see them play in a more kind of important game. Well, a game against tougher opposition at least.
Yeah, well, Guardiola always says he plays Alvarez with Haaland to add another body into the box, and that certainly worked. But I don't know if it's the first time, but it's one of the first times where it's been Alvarez, Haaland, and Kevin De Bruyne. It's normally been Alvarez and then Haaland, Haaland and then Alvarez or De Bruyne. It doesn't seem like he's been able to give all three of them a chance to play that often. Now, yeah, Burnley, as you say, are a division below. They're probably a weaker defence than maybe City will face in the Premier League or Champions League. But it was interesting to see all three of them, and all three of them were involved in the goals and sort of interacting with each other. And when we're talking about Haaland getting maybe a bit more space, you probably have to credit Alvarez with a lot of running and occupying defenders just to free Haaland up for some of those runs. And as much as Haaland drops deep, then also Alvarez will drop deep, and that seems to be a partnership that is growing quietly into something quite effective. And we're talking for ages about City playing with no strikers, then adapting to playing with one. There's an argument to say that playing with two, with Alvarez and Haaland, is a way forward, and is starting to result in quite a lot of goals. If they can perfect that sort of midfield combination behind them, I think that could be maybe something to look for probably next season. But just another option for Guardiola. And we always joke whenever there's a possibility of a 4-4-2 Guardiola side, but having got Alvarez and Haaland up front is quite a scary proposition for opposition, I would imagine.
Well, definitely. And I mean, it's quite the coincidence that the only other time Alvarez has scored twice in a game, Haaland also scored a hat-trick in that match against Nottingham Forest well back in the early of the season. So what do you make of Alvarez on Saturday, sir?
Yeah, that was a championship defence as well, wasn't it?
Well, exactly. So maybe that's the question. If City get relegated, they'll score 2,000 goals in one season.
Yeah,
they'll boss it in League Two. That
was Renan Lodi, wasn't it? Who just got absolutely pulverised. Yeah, he's been very good. Alvarez, I don't think it's any kind of great revelation. As Joe said, I think it's the first time that Alvarez and De Bruyne have played in the same midfield together, which is quite interesting, because kind of Guardiola's. I think Alvarez is like the chaos option, isn't he? In the same way that like the ball just falls to Haaland, stick in the net. The ball just seems to kind of. Things happen when Alvarez gets the ball.
He seems to ricochet through with it, doesn't he? Like his dribbling is kind of like pinball through, and somehow it always lands at his feet.
Yes, yeah. It was kind of his very good pass that sent Haaland through for the first goal that sort of broke 30 minutes of Burnley being the better team, really. So yeah, he's had a really good opening season. And he's backed that up by signing a new deal. There's a bit of silly talk saying that he might be off this summer because he wanted a bigger role in the team, and you're like, you want a bigger role in the team than the 42 goal striker, right? Okay. Obviously it didn't come into his thinking, and he's recommitted his future to City, so that's very encouraging and positive from thinking of the long term for City, to have someone like Alvarez so signed up, because Haaland may not be around for as long if he wants to go and conquer every league in Europe. So I think keeping Alvarez kind of happy and motivated is a very big task for Guardiola, but one that he's done pretty well in. Alvarez has been involved in most games, and he's got a very good goal record.
Well, someone who certainly looks motivated as well is Kevin De Bruyne. Joe, I think during the Leipzig game, I joked that the Michael Jordan meme, he took that personally when Guardiola had the the expert instinct to give him a bit of criticism, light that fire under it, light that fire in his belly, and he's come back in the last 2 games and looked back to his best after a fair few weeks of looking. I wouldn't even say like bad particularly, because he still pulled that amazing goal out against Forest and still had great passes in him. But I think as we've touched on, while he still had the moments in him, his a kind of general all-around play was a bit slacking, and he looked a little bit down in the dumps. But the last 2 matches, he's kind of roared back to his best, as he's often done. I think the year he spent a lot of out injured, he came back the next year like a man possessed, a man looking to make up for lost time. And he just kind of looks like that player to me again now. And if City, if he's like that for the run-in, then Arsenal will be sweating.
Yeah, if you ask Guardiola, he says no one's going to tell you how good Kevin De Bruyne is. Like, we know already. But clearly they've worked together for so long that Guardiola knows when to push the buttons and when to ask for more. And he can see, probably before the rest of us, when De Bruyne is maybe just dipping slightly below his stupidly good levels. And you can see it, though, like in the games that Guardiola was saying these things, there were some misplaced passes from De Bruyne that you would expect him to do. He was losing possession, he was getting a bit frustrated, and I'm sure they're the little things that the manager was sort of talking about. We know he can put one in the top corner from 25 yards, and he has done, even when he's not playing that well. But I think these last 2 games, Leipzig and Burnley, with sort of knockout football and City's season on the line, if you like, to paraphrase Guardiola, saying it was a defining week. He wanted to stay alive in those competitions until after the international break. They needed a player like De Bruyne to sort of step up and take it by the scruff of the neck and go and say, I'm going to be the one to help make this happen. And that is the Kevin De Bruyne that you want. And watching him against Leipzig was, you knew you were watching someone, an incredible footballer at the top of the game, because he was running the show, and when he strides forward, there's no one stopping him. So yeah, Guardiola clearly knows when he's dipping, when's the right time to put an arm around him, and when's the time to sort of challenge him. And he's taken that personally. And no, I think I saw this week he's now the captain of Belgium, and said he's got no plans to retire from international football. So he's clearly motivated to carry on going for a good few years yet at the highest level. And if he's doing that and turning up in the big games for City, they're not going to complain too much.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sure you lads kind of showered him with praise after that Leipzig game, but Sai, he was sensational in that. The shot that hit the crossbar for Haaland's second goal, wasn't it? And then, I mean, if there was ever a performance that deserved a goal like that to top it off at the end, it was that one. As we've kind of touched on there, he's really looking back to his best now, which is what, it's all to Guardiola, because the way he's handled him has been absolutely pitch perfect.
Yeah. Players are always going to be frustrated when they don't play, but two very strong performances. I thought he was maybe even better against Burnley. Some really good kind of involvements for the goals, but yeah, I saw like a compilation of his goals for the season, and like they're all so good.
Doesn't do tap-ins, does he?
No, he doesn't. No, not like that tapping merchant they've got up front. He's just so good, and that's why again there were kind of legitimate questions of like, is De Bruyne kind of does he make the team on merit at the minute for the last few weeks? But there were kind of some people went a bit OTT before the Leipzig game, kind of writing off and writing his football obituary, and he kind of showed why it's always dangerous to do that, because like Joe says, like whenever he is at his level and no one can keep up with it. So City, you started about Haaland. Haaland kind of always does better when De Bruyne plays well, because there's no one like De Bruyne to play balls through, or to smash shots off the crossbar for Haaland to head in. So if City can have De Bruyne and Haaland keeping this form beyond the international break, then they're going to be cock-a-hoop, I think.
Well, you mean to tell me that a section of City's online fan base the same section perhaps that said Ederson was no longer a good goalkeeper wrote off a player too quickly. I just can't believe it. I can't believe it. But, you know, speaking of Ederson, it brings us neatly to, Si, how you wanted to talk about kind of City's defence and how, you know, they've kind of come in for criticism this season, and rightfully so. There's been ups and downs there, but the last 5 games now, they've kept 5 clean sheets. And as much as we talk about the attacking football being back to its best and being important, of course, 13 goals in 2 matches, the defence is, of course, you know, the foundations that all that is built on. And I think we've touched on Ruben Diaz quite a lot and how transformative he's been. But City have played pretty much a different defence in every match in those keep clean sheets. And everyone, you know, from Rico Lewis to Nathan Ake at left back, John Stones coming back, even Laporte coming in for a rare start, and especially Akanji and Diaz. Everyone has kind of upped their levels in recent weeks, it feels.
Yeah, it's exactly that. You've got Diaz, Stones, Akanji and Ake all in kind of very, very good form. Laporte did very well against Burnley when he came in. And yeah, I'm sort of always reminded of City's run to the Champions League final in 2021, when it wasn't like that exciting a team and they were struggling without a false 9, but the one thing they had was a defence, and it's a really old kind of adage or cliche, but, you know, it's defence that is the most important thing. And, you know, if you see a manager come in to replace someone who's sacked, like, the first thing they'll do is sort the defence out, defence first, and then you build from there. And if City are going to win the Premier League and the Champions League, or one of, then they're going to need a really tight defence and a tighter defence than they have had for most of the season. But it's kind of, again, encouraging for them to see that things are coming into place at this time of year. Because, I mean, it's a funny old season with the World Cup, but normally City are amazing between kind of November and February, March, and then it all tails off a bit, and they've usually got enough to win something, and they've already won the Carabao Cup or whatever. But it kind of tails off, and you get that sort of limp FA Cup semi-final defeat, and the Champions League they go out of. So this season it's different, and they've not been great. Kind of, well, they weren't great in January, and sort of the beginning of February, and then they've kind of stepped it up, and now they're in kind of their best form of the season. And, you know, obviously the international break could disrupt that, but if they can continue that into April and May, then we're going to see kind of a City that we haven't really seen before at that time of year.
And I think Guardiola's touched upon it himself, Joe, that it kind of feels like the jeopardy of these matches, the win or go home aspect of the Champions League now, and the FA Cup, of course, and pretty much the Premier League as well. If City drop any more points now, with the way Arsenal continuing to just win and win, and they've got nothing else to play for now after dropping out of the Europa League, it feels like one defeat and City's season is over with. So is it that jeopardy, that drama that does kind of spur City on a bit?
Yeah, and they've got a lot of players who've been there and done it, and they weren't able to put that run together, as Si mentioned, over the winter because of the World Cup. But it feels like they're getting there now. It's 10 unbeaten, 8 wins. Even the 2 draws that they had, one was the Forest game where they should have won 5-0, and the other was the Leipzig game where Guardiola got exactly what he wanted from his players in that game. So they've essentially had 10 games where they've been on top of the game and done exactly what the manager wanted. And if they can continue that after the international break, we've seen City go on 15, 20 plus unbeaten runs. If they can do that, they'll have to do it because they've got very difficult draws and difficult fixtures coming up after the international break. If they can do that, they'll just got to keep putting the pressure on Arsenal, and they can't do anything about Arsenal's results apart from when Arsenal come to the Etihad. But what they can do is keep winning and make Arsenal feel that if they slip up, then City will close the gap, and they've done it before, and it's just a case of can they do it again?
Just a moment to look ahead to City's hectic April. Don't go anywhere. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Talking City podcast, brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. Now, Si, of course, one of the biggest stories of the match, kind of beforehand and afterwards, of course, was the return of Vincent Kompany. He's done a great job at Burnley this season. As we've touched on, I think only 5 or 6 players who went down with him last season have remained. He's brought the age group of that squad down drastically, signing loads of exciting young players, some of which from City. You know, Taylor Harwood-Bellis couldn't actually play in the match given he's on loan from the Etihad. And you know, as the talk was before the match, well before, and as was expected, even Guardiola added fuel to the fire by saying he's kind of destined to be the next, you know, a City manager one day, if not directly Guardiola's replacement. Now, obviously, the result didn't exactly lend much credence to that, but did he kind of still show his credentials for potentially getting the City job one day, you know, despite the result?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, for that first 30 minutes, Burnley did to City what kind of 2-3 Premier League teams have done maybe this season. You know, they pressed them so well, so aggressively, and kind of made mistakes. And it was, you know, Diaz made a really good interception at 0-0, which, you know, could have changed the game. So, you know, they're not the first team to not be able to deal with Erling Haaland and De Bruyne and Bernardo and, well, not Bernardo, but, you know, so many players playing so well. So yeah, it was, you know, another very good bit of evidence that company's doing a really good job. You know, everyone at City would love Company to be City manager one day. Guardiola kind of didn't put a time scale on it because he can't, and why would he? And Company before the game said, you know, tell Pep to stop saying that. Because I'm manager of Burnley and we're in the Championship and whatever. So is that kind of deal, like, Company looks to have loads of potential, but I mean, Friday morning we had Patrick Vieira sacked at Crystal Palace. Patrick Vieira seen at various points as a future City manager, and he's got a lot of supporters at the club, but you know, Crystal Palace decided that his road was run there. So you know, Company will very much be under the microscope for the next few years to see how he can do with Burnley in the Premier League, if, as expected, he gets them there, and then maybe how he does somewhere else before. And you know, if he keeps going up and up, then of course he'll be right in the frame for the City job. But as kind of Vieira shows, it's not always straightforward.
No, of course, you know, football's a fickle business, as we all know too well, Joe, but Burnley are 13 points clear at the top of the Championship. You know, when they went down, I think many of us kind of expected, especially with like rumblings of financial problems there as well, losing so much of that main squad. Of course, Nick Pope, James Tarkowski, really important players who, you know, were stalwarts in that Premier League team for the 7 years they managed to hold on up in the top flight. Everyone expected, I think, people probably thought they'd more chance of going down again and coming straight back up, and they almost certainly will do that now, barring a collapse of epic proportions. But to do what he has done at Turf Moor, which isn't just, you know, get a team to bounce back straight away. As I mentioned earlier, he's completely transformed that team. Only Ashley Barnes, Jay Rodriguez, Brownhill, Cork, Bailey Peacock, Carroll, the reserve goalkeeper, and Tyler Roberts, Charlie Roberts, one of them. They're the 6 or 7 players that are still there from that team that went down. Otherwise, he's kind of unearthed really exciting young talents. Nathan Teller, Zahori, exciting players that, you know, in that first half an hour did give City a bit of a scare. And Burnley, an unfashionable club, and he's completely changed the way they play. For 8 years under Sean Dyche, they were the rough and tumble trip to the dentist, as Guardiola used to always say. But now they're an exciting footballing team, and to do that in such a short amount of time with a shoestring budget is very impressive. And to think what he could do, you know, that, and most of that is pure coaching, you know, to go with his good scouting. But to think what he could do, you know, at City is quite exciting one day, as Si says, if his trajectory continues to go upwards.
Yeah, you've taken the words out of my mouth. It's not just the fact that he's taken the same group of players and got them back up and got them to do the same thing. He's not only got a new squad, basically, he's taught them to play a completely different way of football, where Burnley, their identity was more defensive and sort of physical and direct for so long, and within the space of a year, 9 months, it's now completely different and forward thinking. And I do think if he could follow the progression of sort of someone like Graham Potter, where he's done well in the Championship, got a team promoted, got himself into the Premier League, and then he probably needs a stepping stone. I don't think he's the next City manager. I think he'd probably be the one after that, maybe, if he ever was going to be. But he knows that. He said he's a Championship manager at the moment, and City need the best manager in the world, and he's not that, and he won't be that for some time. And I think that shows a bit of awareness as well. He's not going to take it just for the sake of it. He knows where City need to be and want to be, and where he would fit into that. But what we also saw on Saturday was he would have the full support of City fans. I don't think I've ever seen that for an opposition manager at any club, really. But the reception he got was something else. So for the fans to back him so much, if he ever did become City manager, no guarantees, obviously, but I think he'd be a very, very popular choice.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask you then, like, what was his reception like? Being there in the stands, and do you reckon Burnley should come up next year? Do you think there's already questions of, can he still do that style of football in the Premier League? Do you think he'll take any lessons from this match and apply them next season?
Yeah, no, I don't think he'll take many lessons, because there aren't nobody plays quite like City do. He might next season might think more about the goal difference if he's coming up against a rampant City at home, but nothing more than that. But yeah, I mean, it must be very rare as a manager to have both sets of fans singing your name for basically the whole 90 minutes from one to the other. And Burnley fans clearly love him, and as I've sort of said before, he's kind of gone out of his way to distance himself from City while he's kind of started off in his managerial career, and is fully committed to Burnley, and they appreciate that. But City fans are never gonna forget everything he did for them, and that the statue outside the ground kind of is testament to that. So they really enjoyed seeing him, but also seeing him come back as a success, because that is also kind of quite a big thing that was anything but a guarantee, really, when he left or when anyone leaves the club.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for City, next up in the semi-finals, a return to Wembley, will be Sheffield United. They overcame Blackburn in a really exciting match earlier on the day on Sunday. And, of course, the winner was scored by one Tommy Doyle, Joe. And unfortunately for him and James McAtee, neither will be able to play, which is a bit of a shame for them to get Sheffield United to Wembley and be unable to take part.
Yeah, but as has been uncovered in the last couple of days, that's the competition rules. You can't play against a team, against your parent club. I'm not sure whether City would allow that. There's an argument to say yes, it would be a great experience for them and a continuation of their progression, but also City need to get to that final, and if they didn't, and it was Doyle or McAtee who played a starring role in that at Wembley to stop them, then there'd be all sorts of inquests, wouldn't there? But no, they've both been doing well, and I think both of them had a slow start to the season, sort of working out how the Championship worked, and McAtee obviously had the game where he was substituted at half time because he was so off the pace, but both of them seem very, very popular, and you can just see by the amount of starts they're getting and goals they're getting, and the confident goals as well. I think McAtee scored one at, was it Sunderland, where he just took on a few players and popped it in the bottom corner. That Doyle shot doesn't happen in the last minute if he's not flowing with confidence, but he's done those, he's scored those goals time and again for City in the academy, and he did well on loan at Cardiff last season, and that's what he has in his locker when he's on the top of his game, and not only a run to the semi-finals of the FA Cup, but a promotion push, and Sheffield United should join Burnley in the Premier League next season. That's not bad going from what City would want to get out of that loan. So it's disappointing they're not going to play in the semi-final, but the fact that that's even a problem to have is probably a good thing for everyone concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And McAtee wasn't the only McAtee in the FA Cup semi-finals this weekend. Si, his brother was playing for Grimsby, and Si, you kind of got the chance to talk to them both ahead of the weekend. And how was that? Because obviously, quite the story. I didn't realise he had a brother playing for Grimsby, and of course, their great cup run ended in heartache with a 5-0 defeat to Brighton. But what a story it was for the League Two side to get so far.
Yeah, I mean Grimsby was one of the tales of the FA Cup this year, and the McAtee brothers both getting to where they got to was also great as well. It was very good to speak to them both and see how kind of different they are. They both sort of couldn't make out enough how different they were, but you speak to them and they're similar in an awful lot of ways. But John, being the older brother, has kind of helped James through his time at Sheffield United, because that's been his first kind of foray into senior football. And James was kind of told City didn't want James to go on loan basically at the start of last season, and it was put to him that nobody in this squad has been on loan and come back to the first team. Like, going on loan is usually a sign that you won't make it, and James's response was like, well, I'll be the first one then. So that kind of shows you his character. But then he really did take a knock in that game at Luton when he got subbed off at half time, and it's then when John, who's at Grimsby but has had a lot of rejection and adversity in his career, has kind of come to the party and helped James through it. So yeah, it's there's a lot of things that kind of you need to make it in the game professionally, and having that good family environment is certainly really important. So John has done great in his own right at Grimsby this year, and will be going back to his parent club Luton next year, trying to crack the first team there, and James will be heading back to City hoping to make it. But before then, his job is to finish the job with Sheffield United and get promoted. It's a shame he won't get to play the FA Cup semi, but still plenty to be proud of from his season.
Yeah, he certainly looks like I think he was clearly one to be picked out. When if any three of us have gone to watch the under-21s or under-18s in recent years, McAtee along with likes of Cole Palmer now, and obviously Phil Foden, one who clearly stood out as a really talented player who's destined for big things, but be they at City or not. But the under-21s that are still at the club, Joe, of course, are still going great guns, and there was the small matter of a Manchester derby this past week as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, and it was over after 15 minutes when City went 2-0 up, and then 5 minutes later, United had a player sent off, which was a very, very clear red card. And by I think 23 minutes in, City were 3-0 up and a man advantage, and it was game over. Then it was a matter of how many they'd get. They got 6 in the end, and Brian Barry Murphy said he was sort of more pleased with the second half, or the final hour, if you like, of how they managed that man advantage and just kept the possession and kept United penned back and got the rewards in the end with some goals. But it was an identical goal every single time. Send the winger to the byline, cut it in, either a tap in or a good finish, and it was just far too easy. And the only way to emphasise how one-sided it was is after the red card, United brought on 36-year-old Tom Huddleston to shore up the defence, and it worked for a little bit, but they just admitted defeat and said we've got to sort of slow things down and just take our medicine here, and it was the most one-sided game you will see in a long time. But I spoke to Will Dixon afterwards, who scored 2 goals, and yes, he was delighted to win a Manchester derby, score 6 past United, second time this season. But they're focused on the title, and they moved above Chelsea now. They've still got 2 games in hand. They want that group of players are so determined to get 3 in a row in the Premier League too, and the under-18s are in the Youth Cup semi-final at Arsenal, so they're not in the Youth Cup, the Youth League in Europe, but there's still a lot of positives that can be taken in the Academy of the season, and 2 or 3 trophies as well.
Well, if only United had Tom Huddleston on the bench at Anfield, they might not have lost 7-0 back there. But Si, other cup competitions, there's been draws, of course, and the Champions League draw is quite tasty, if not a little bit scary for City. Bayern Munich in the quarterfinals, reunion on the cards with João Cancelo and, of course, Leroy Sané. And the reward for should City win that tie is a semi-final with either Chelsea or Real Madrid. It's made for a fascinating contest tournament because one of Napoli, Benfica, AC Milan or Inter will make it to the final, which will certainly make it a fresh Champions League for once. But to have all the four kind of biggest guns in one side of the draw, while it's going to make for some absolutely remarkable matches, you suspect, it's certainly, it's not easy. We kind of laugh at City sometimes when they get the easy domestic cup runs, even though I don't think that's much of a truism anymore. But in the Champions League, it certainly never has been, because, my God, what a task they've got on the hand if they want to get to Istanbul.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Edison on international duty saying that they're going to knock Real Madrid out so that Carlo Ancelotti can be Brazil manager sooner. So that's the confidence you want from your goalkeeper. It's very, very tough. I don't think Bayern are at the level that they have been in previous years. Certainly when they won it a few years ago, they were sort of frighteningly good. And now they're not there. So it's tough. Bayern probably like the team after Real Madrid that City didn't want to get, but they've got them, and I think they've been helped out in the FA Cup draw, getting Sheffield United rather than United or Brighton, because that game is kind of 3 days after City are at the Allianz Arena, and that the FA Cup kind of gives City a bit of respite, where they can rotate a bit should they need to. But yeah, I mean, no one can say City haven't done it the hard way if they go on to win it. It would also be kind of peak Guardiola to knock Bayern and Real out in thrilling fashion and then lose the final to Benfica or something like that. So all the possibilities from the Champions League draw. Just a shame, I suppose, for the fans that they're in Germany for the third time in a row. But I'm sure they won't mind it if they get a big win. It's gonna be exciting, and City can kind of reinforce their status in Europe if they beat Bayern, and then you're looking at probably, we can't say fully because I got so much abuse for discounting Chelsea from the scenario, but presuming Real Madrid beat Chelsea, that is then a repeat of the semi-final from last year, which was, I think, one of the most entertaining ties in the history of the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it certainly does feel, to be fair, that Chelsea are in that weird stage where they're absolutely rubbish in the league and then somehow manage to scrape a Champions League. It's happened twice before. I would not surprise me if it happened again. But, Joe, whoever they face, even though Chelsea not the best, it's not exactly Stamford Bridge, not exactly an ideal place to go in a semi-final either. But even though it's that tough a draw, is it kind of good for City in a way? We touched on it earlier, the jeopardy of these kind of knockout matches spurs them on, and it seems to me like the tougher opponents kind of makes them raise their game somewhat as well. Like if you kind of discount the exit to Real Madrid last year, the exit City have had in those heartbreaking fashions, apart from Liverpool as well, has tended to be against clubs you would normally expect City to beat. Now, Monaco was obviously an amazing Monaco side, but they should have beaten them. Lyon, of course, Tottenham. City's exits tend to come against teams you'd expect them to beat. In Tottenham's case, it did beat, probably in the league as it was anyway. So, there'll be no room for complacency whatsoever against the champions of Spain and Germany, or Chelsea. Don't discount that.
No, but for the purposes of the argument, City are probably going to have to face Bayern and Real Madrid, aren't they, to get to the final? And I mean, if they'd have managed to avoid those two, they'd have done very, very well. But I think, Si, you touched on it last week, that it's probably an advantage to face them both over two legs rather than meeting especially Real Madrid in the final, because they're just so good in these competitions and have more experience. So City know that they are at least equal with both of these sides. and it will just come down to those two legs, and I think they'll have learnt a lot from the Real Madrid game, or the games last season, in sort of throwing away a couple of goals in the first leg, just not hanging on for 5 minutes in the second leg, and you would expect. I think we've seen quite a few times that City have learnt lessons from previous defeats. I think they will do again this time, and I've been trying to think back to the pre-season game against Bayern Munich, and could City learn anything? And yes, they won 1-0 and Haaland scored, but there was such a torrential thunder and lightning storm that interrupted the game. It was like a 70-80 minute game, and I don't think either side really fancied it. So I'm not sure we can take much from that game, but there are a lot of players familiar with each other. João Cancelo, as you say, will be playing. Players like Leroy Sané and Sadio Mane, who I don't know who I'd play on as well as Kyle Walker in fullback for City, but no, it'll be fascinating to see how the sides line up, the sort of tactics to go for, and it's a run where you could be confident if City get to the final, or they could get knocked out in the quarterfinals, and you've got no idea how to call it.
Yeah, well, we certainly can't wait for those ties, and it's set up for an incredibly busy April for City. They have 8 fixtures already kind of penned in for next month, and that doesn't include Brighton and West Ham matches that will have to be rearranged due to the FA Cup commitments. So no doubt if they have to go into May, that makes May even busier. In contrast, Arsenal does 6 games in April, and much more time after that, as I mentioned earlier, their exit from the Europa League. They've got one thing to focus on, City still competing on 3 different fronts. We've sort of said many times how hard it is to do that. And, that April is going to make or break City, really, isn't it? Because it's such a heavy load. The games, even in the league, there's not really any respite because they have to play Liverpool. And, of course, that massive match with Arsenal themselves that will kind of define the season either way, you'd imagine. It's going to be exciting, but, man, it's going to be quite difficult for the Blues.
Yeah, it will, but it's kind of the old kind of saying that, like, you're never tired when you're winning. And if you look at like the last week, City, Arsenal are 3 points further ahead, but Erling Haaland's 8 goals in 2 competitions that are not the Premier League will make Premier League teams much more worried about Erling Haaland than they would have done if City weren't in those competitions. So if you're going through in those competitions, you will be seen as more formidable, and I think the way it works is City have got Bayern away in the second leg of the quarter, and then Sheffield United in the FA Cup semi, and then 4 days later they will have Arsenal at home. So if you've got Arsenal coming up to the Etihad, having been beaten twice by City already this season, having never won at the Etihad in Guardiola's time, and facing a team that has just qualified for the Champions League semi and the FA Cup final, I think you're a bit more concerned than you would be if you were coming up against a team that was like not in those competitions but a few points behind you in the Premier League. Because as well, I think City will be playing catch up in terms of games with the rearranged games, but when both teams are level, the points gap is 5 points, and if City were to win, then the points gap would be 2 points. So that is only kind of one game where you've got margin for error. City have got a better goal difference as well. So it's I think it's easy to say yes, Arsenal. It's all set up for Arsenal because they've only got a game a week and they've not got Europa League commitments anymore, and that's definitely a factor. But then we expected Arsenal to be a bit tired after going 120 minutes against Sporting, and they absolutely battered Crystal Palace. So it's going to be exciting either way, and I think I would expect the title race to go well into May.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Arsenal had that kind of wobble where they where they lost to Everton, of course, and then drew to Brentford, and then even after that they had that mad period when they had to rely on last minute winners against Villa and Bournemouth. But since then they've been winning quite comfortably. I think people looked at an away trip to Fulham, who are really in form. I thought, it could be a potential banana skin. That easily dealt with 3-0. And as you say there, Palace easily swept aside 4-1 despite going and the distance against Sporting just a few days earlier, Joe. I mean, there is kind of some parity in the upcoming fixtures. Arsenal also have to play Liverpool, of course. They have to play City, and they actually have to play Chelsea 3 days after playing City as well. So that's by no means an easy run. And then of course, the first two games in May, they've also got Newcastle away and Brighton at home. So they're not easy games by any stretch of the imagination. But so it's going to be interesting to see how it all kind of pans out, because City may have more games, but I'd say, at least in the league, Arsenal probably have the more difficult set of fixtures.
They do, but I'm looking now and they've got 2 or 3 games against sides who might need to also get some points to stay up towards the end of the season. So that also comes into account. And I think Side has said that the title race will go into May. I think it definitely will do, just because of those rearranged games. I think City will probably go into the last week having a game in hand. So we could be expecting a title race like we've seen before, where it goes down to maybe even the final day again. So that's where City's experience will probably come into it. Yes, Arsenal have those sort of not as many games to play, but that also means they've got time to think about it more. And so far, they've not shown any signs of the pressure getting to them. But you never know what's going to happen. And I keep thinking if City win it, it might be like was it 2014 when Liverpool were going so well and then fell at the last minute, or slipped, if you like, and everyone remembers that season for Liverpool being so well, but it was City who won the title. So it might be one like that. I think City do have a lot of it's not just a lot of games, it's a lot of travelling as well. They've got 3 trips to London, 4 if they get to the FA Cup final. They've got 2 trips to the South Coast if they get through to Champions League semi-final. That's 2 more European away trips. So then City aren't going to have any time to think about it. They've just got to go from one game to the other and win. So it's how they use that. They've done it before. They've used that sort of momentum to their advantage. But Guardiola's also complained about the travelling and the effect that can have on results. So it'll just be how both sides manage it, and they've got a different set of circumstances to cope with. But you still can't rule City out, even though things seem like they're working against them in that title race. When City get on a winning run, they're very, very hard to stop, even if they've got big game after big game.
If you had to call it now, we're in the international break, Joe. There's 8 points in it. There's 11 games left to play for City, 10 for Arsenal. Who's winning it?
I think City will beat Arsenal and win the game in hand. So that just means that Arsenal have to slip up once. I think the experience means that I think City still have an edge, but I mean, if Arsenal carry on winning, then no one's stopping them, are they? And they've been so good this season.
Si, who's winning it?
I think City, but I think, as Joe said, it could well go into the final week, because I think there's only 3 midweeks left basically, and they've got 2 games to rearrange. So City could go into the final week second, needing to beat Brighton away and Brentford away to win the title, which would be a spectacular final week.
Mm-hmm. I'm a sucker for narrative, and I do think Arsenal are going to just pinch it this year. But of course, there's plenty more to come, and we'll certainly be excited to see how it all pans out. But there's still a couple of weeks away yet till club football returns. So, ladies and gentlemen, we'll bring the latest episode of the Talking City podcast to a close right there. Thank you all very much for listening. If you want to keep up to date with all the latest City news over the international break, you know where to go. It's manchestereveningnews.co.uk/Manchester City. You can get us on Twitter at ManCityMen, and our Facebook page is Manchester Evening News-Manchester City. And if you want to watch this podcast in living colour and see Simon in his dark little dingy cave and my nice mug, then all you need to do is go over to our YouTube channel. It is Manchester Evening News-Man City. We'll be back soon, no doubt, to look into what's coming up for City on the horizon after the international break, and as we said, certainly exciting times on the horizon. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, it is goodbye for now. Ta-ra.